And it was like an amazing team of people who were trying to build this new language and trying to understand all the out of sequences and talking to the actors about where their technical turns are, because they had their own level. Like, we had a week of rehearsal with Diego and Sienna to get some of the conversation out of the way, because there was so much conversation to be had. When are we in the present? When are we in the past? What do I know here? Where do we both turn at this point? Is this past or present? Like, it's both in a way, like.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. Today's episode takes us behind the scenes of director Tara Miele's new romance drama, Wander Darkly. The film follows a couple who, shortly after becoming parents, experience a disaster that takes them on a surreal and disorienting journey through both their past and an uncertain future. In addition to Wander Darkly, Ms. Miele's other directorial credits include the feature films Starving in Suburbia, Gone Missing, and The Lake Effect, the movie for television Lost Boy, and episodes of the series Batwoman, Arrow, and Hawaii Five-0. Ms. Miele spoke with fellow director Rachel Lee Goldenberg about filming Wander Darkly in front of a virtual audience. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Hi, Tara.
Rachel.
I am just so excited to be doing this. I watched the movie and then I texted you and I was thinking, oh, I have so many questions for Tara. And then you asked me to do this. And so now this is just my chance to ask all the questions that I selfishly wanted to ask. Yeah. But we can make other people watch us do it.
I love it. I mean, like in another world, we would be at a bar doing this. So we'll just have that conversation.
Yes, in another world. I wanted to start with something that we've talked about being a writer, because you're a writer-director, and this film, your film, so first of all, the film is brilliant and it's just ambitious, and it's also so cool to see it as sort of knowing some of your other work, see it as sort of a continuation of that journey, and I want to talk about that journey. But I was curious, because it's such a visual film and such a specific stylized film, how you worked as a writer, how much of that is in the script, how much that, how you sort of thought of those two roles.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting. It's such an evolution. I really try to put like the foundation and characters first, and then let the style evolve out of that. So like as a writer, the first impetus was my husband and I got in this bad car crash, and thank goodness we're fine. But I did have a heavy concussion, and I had that moment that Adrienne has on the couch where she's calling to her baby and the baby's ignoring her because she's a baby. And I was like, oh my God, I died. And it was such like a clear thought for me, just for a split second. It seemed so true. And then a second later, it was obviously so not true. But I was really fascinated with that, like how, what an unreliable narrator I was, like, from moment to moment in that state. And then a few weeks later, we were better, like we were at my parents' house and it was Thanksgiving and everyone's like fighting over the turkey and the kids are crying. And I just was deeply overwhelmed with gratitude for the fact that we were still living these messy, delicate little lives. And that was the beginning. I was like, oh my God, I just want to share this feeling with as many people as possible. So for me, the whole journey started with like an emotional, like feeling that I was like, I got to get this feeling out. I got to put this on film. I have to like somehow get this out. And it was like a few weeks later, I think I woke up in the middle of the night and I had wanted to do something about like a long-term relationship and the best and the worst of a couple and what makes us who we are and what means you should stay or go. Like I was really interested in that exploration anyway. But I sort of woke up in the middle of the night, like, oh, I know the beginning, middle, and end of a story that I think could give you this feeling at the end. And then when I sat down to write it, it was definitely like cards everywhere. It was like, like this idea of cards everywhere. And I knew that the couple was going to talk to each other about the memories within the memories. Like I knew some of the voice of it and how that would go. But normally I have such a specific treatment that you could like read and it would be the movie. And in this one, the treatment seemed crazy. Like it just seemed like nobody can read this. Like until I execute it, it's not going to make sense, And then it wasn't until like maybe the second draft, like I sent that very first draft off to Lynette Howell Taylor, who was a good friend and who had expressed like interest. She was the one who was like, go spec that. Like, that's a great idea. Go spec that. And it wasn't until she sort of started developing it with me where she was like being my audience a little bit. So all of the things that were like deep back in my head about, well, how does that transition work? How's that going to work? Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. So she was really good at like forcing me to pull out what was sort of buried back deep in my head to make me put it on the page. So that by the time we got to the production phase or prep phase, a lot of it was really on the page. But I have found like if I get too thinking about who the actors are, thinking about what the color palette is, I can just really like skip all the hard work of the writing and like get right to the directing stuff. And so I really try to like wait and like change hats at some point, like late in the writing process.
So just to be really specific, like in the script, does it say like camera transitions us to X or like,
Yeah.
like what is?
I try never to write the word camera, but I think maybe it says like the world spins and we find them. Like I do a lot of like, we find them and we are in, you know, like I do a lot of that. So specifically it was like, you know, I think I used that one in particular for when they kiss and the camera swoops under the bed and comes back up. But I didn't know that that was how we were going to execute that until maybe 2 weeks before we were about to shoot, because we were working through the transitions. We had a plan for each one of them. Carolina Costa, who is our cinematographer, did not come in until 3 weeks before we shot, which was really challenging. But that was her idea. She like had, I think she's, you know, she pulled it out of another, like a commercial or something, somewhere that she had seen it. And she was like, oh, I think we could do this with the bed. And I was like, oh, that's great. Let's do that. You know, I had sort of pictured a more around the world thing with like blurring lights and, but it worked great. And it's like a wonderful addition that she brought. So the other one was when Adrienne is in the hospital hallway and she walks out and she's in the alleyway. I remember sitting in prep and saying, I think what I'd like to do, because I wanted to do everything as much in camera as possible. And I said, I'd love it if we were going to be on La Brea Boulevard. And I said, we just build like a small flat that looks just like the hospital wall. We paint it the same. We like put on a box or something, like makes it look like legit. And then we're just going to pan with her and it'll just be super seamless. And my producers were like, we don't own La Brea Boulevard. Like we can't like build like a whole, you know, and then of course the lighting department was like, we can't just have daylight. We have to like tent it. And I was like, okay, well, so can we do it though? And everyone's like, yeah, like everyone just did it. Like, so it was constantly big asks. I was constantly just like, can we get a 75-foot crane to get over the LACMA lights so I can do this transition? Like, can we, you know, it was just, can we go out to get dolphins for 3 days? Like, can we, you know, it was this constant, like asking for crazy things.
I mean, it makes the movie feel huge. Like it really, the scope just feels epic, and the way that you're going from space to space just gives it this. Yeah, it gives. I can tell you were harassing people for the things you wanted because it does have that big. It feels big. So in terms of that, then just because everything I've done is much more based in reality, even when it's a musical, it still feels much more based in reality. I'm just curious about how you conveyed to the crew and to the cast, like how much did you let them in on what's real? Did you even establish what's real or what's not? Like how did you talk about the world?
Yeah, so the way that I always thought about this was that it was an emotional reality for her. So she was really clear with this idea that like she felt dead inside. And it's all along. I don't know if everyone's seen the movie, spoiler alert, but you know, it's because
I know on the podcast.
I've watched it.
Spoiler-filled conversation.
It is spoiler-filled. Okay. So like the fact that she feels dead inside is sort of what happens when you're deeply grieving, right? So it's like she has this emotional reality. It's the same thing when she doesn't trust him. She just has this sense that something else is going on than what's being told to her. So like the whole thing I said is about her emotional reality. And we were constantly in her perspective. Like everything the camera does is like the beginning, we're like trapped and we're static and we're stuck. And then as soon as the car crash happens, we're like crazy and like swinging everywhere. And then as soon as Mateo shows back up in her world on the bridge, we go into this very verite grounded place. So it's somehow just his presence has like grounded her back into something that feels more normal and more like regulated and more natural. And then that lasts like all the way until the wedding. And when she wakes up in the morning, everything's totally static, like completely dead. And I remember in our edits, like watching it with an audience thinking, why did I even give that clue? Like, why did I change it right in that moment? You know, like you want the audience to feel like, oh, something's off, but you don't want the audience to get ahead of you and be like,
Right.
with that, so yeah. So, and then at the very end, everything's on dolly and everything's really smooth, except when we're on the water, because you can't be on dolly on the water. But
That was another question I had actually that you were just touching on, of the audience and how, because like, congratulations, you pulled off like a huge twist. Like, literally both times I watched it, I got chills. She's just like, oh, it's working. Like, the system, she built a thing that really is effective. Got me twice. But so I'm curious about that, like how much you thought about audience and like how much information you wanted to give, and what the whole approach was there.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't want anyone to know, like from the minute I had the idea ended with, but he's the one who died. And when I started sort of like, I don't know if you do this, but like I do like very careful soft pitches to people who I love and trust, just to see what their faces do when I tell them what I want to do. So I would always tell the pitch and then be like, but he's the one who died. And everyone would go, and I was like, that's good. Like, that's working, like, so if I can get that in the movie, right, with the emotional resonance of it, that people are like, oh my God, like then I'm doing what I set out to do in the first place. So I find it super gratifying when people don't know what's coming, or if they, feel it at the end, if it really resonates that way. But what we realized in like the pre-screens with just friends and family was not everybody was gonna, like, some people were gonna figure it out early. It didn't seem to matter whether or not they figured it out. They still were along for the ride. They still enjoyed the movie. And so that was, at the end of the day, what mattered. It was like, even if you could watch the whole thing again and still enjoy that journey with her, knowing exactly what's going on. So
I did not know. I feel like I was like your ideal dumb audience. It was just like in the palm of your hand every.
I'm also, by the way, I'm like a really good audience. Like I'm like I hate horror movies because I'm so upset by them. I'm like, oh God, like a real good audience. Yeah.
So then, through your screenings, how was the movie shaped in the edit? The first time I watched, I thought, wait, can I make because the first time I watched, I thought, oh my God, there's a billion variables here. I bet the movie changed 20 times, like that, like completely, it feels like there's just so much. And then the second time I watched and I saw how careful it was and the things I hadn't noticed before. And I was like, oh, there's actually, I think that there's less change than I thought. Maybe I think it's like a lot of this was already here, and this is probably a lot of this mirrors the script exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a matter of degrees. That was the wildest thing that I found. We would do these screenings and the movie would be too long and a little messy, but people would really feel it. And then you would go in and just clean it up and shorten it, and suddenly people were like, yeah, it's good, but they weren't feeling it. And you were like, what happened? Or like, you would do like change one scene and people hated her. You would change one scene and people hated him. And like, it was, and then some screenings we had fights. People were breaking out in fights about who was like more like liable in their relationship. It was like very Rorschach test, in our audience experiences. But some of the things that really changed in that experience were needing to let the audience in on the love and the nuclear family of their relationship, like right up front. Like, instead of coming into family with problems or couple with problems, it was like we had to just set up a little bit of the real inciting incident was they had this baby. And so like setting up the love and the little bit of like nervousness even in Diego's face in that scene, and then launching that into like, oh, we don't have dates and you're not responsible, you're not here. And that whole thing, it really like rooted people in a good way. And then the other thing that changed significantly, I would just say there was like a little bit, when they're like at the rooftop party and we get a glimpse of him leaving, it was like we had to sort of understand a little bit of what was going on for her early on and not save all of that for the end. Otherwise, the audience wasn't with her. So there were those like kind of little things that we added, transitions that wouldn't have been there otherwise. Planned for, but very few of those. I mean, everything was so planned to like a look had to go to the transition, to go to the thing, had to, so it was all pretty locked, and we had no time, it was like, so as much as it feels epic and scopy, we were moving constantly. We shot in LA, so we only had 24 days with 2 pickup days on the water. It was, and we joked that we were making The Revenant. I mean, we were like, you know, it was a really intense shoot. Like definitely
Yeah,
the most
you
intense
had
thing.
so many locations for a 24-day shoot. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was nuts. And it was like, you know, like an amazing team of people who are trying to build this new language and trying to understand all the out of sequences and talking to the actors about where their technical turns are, because they had their own level. Like, you know, we had a week of rehearsal with Diego and Sienna just to get some of the conversation out of the way, because there was so much conversation to be had. When are we in the present? When are we in the past? What do I know here? Where do we both turn at this point? Is this past or present? Like, it's both in a way, you know, like, so even just mapping that as one conversation that the two of them are having throughout the movie helped. Like, if you
How
just,
did you talk about that with them?
you know, like I said, we did have a week of rehearsal, which was amazing. We went through with highlighters and said, like, this is where you're talking in the present, this is the turn, so they'd be at the same point, you know. But a lot of it was like interpretation. So it was like a conversation about, you know, how we each envisioned what that would feel like. And we had a lot of time, I think, because the script was so vulnerable and so personal. It was a lot of time spent in like sharing what their experiences were with like grief, with loss, with breakups, with divorce, with kids, right? Like as parents. And also like any sort of thing of anything supernatural, anything like spiritual, anything like, did you ever have a bad feeling about something and then avoid the thing, you know, like sort of that uncomfortable place of the unknown. And
Mm-hmm.
sharing those things. So there was a lot of trust built, you know, before we got
Yeah.
to set. And even still, there were days on set where one scene would feel really tricky for either or both of them. And it was like a, you know, a long hour and a half conversation to like make sure that it was as elevated on the screen as it was on the page, and that it felt, you know, I think some of it was just really tricky to execute when you're saying like, I'm dead, you know, like,
Yeah.
like, I think Sienna really had to get herself to a state where she was sort of unmoored
Mm-hmm.
and like really floaty and not as lucid. And that feeling of lack of control was really, really hard for her and was really working. So she would
Yeah.
be freaking out. And then all of us behind camera would be like, oh my God, she's so good. Like, she's so good.
Yeah.
And it was this kind of dissonance and me just constantly being like, I promise it's working. Like it's
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, I like the performances. I was blown away by them, not only because they're really fantastic performances, but just how many layers they have to, you know, they have to work in, like really specifically those scenes. I love those scenes in the flashbacks where where they're in the scene, but also talking as their present, I don't know, present day self in the past. And I was curious about that, like how that's one of those things that, you know, once we see it executed, it seems very obvious, and because it just works. And so it's like, you know, it seems like an easy magic trick because you pull it off. But then in the moment, I was thinking about working with actors and how emotional that can be, and how, you know, how that feels like the kind of thing you get stuck in your head for hours being like, wait, but am I acting like present self or past self, and how do I do that?
Yes. And so there was a lot of that. Honestly, I think they're both incredibly intelligent and, you know, analytical. Like Diego was like, you know, I'm trying to play this intention and then I have this intention and you want them at the same time. It's like, it's not as easy as it, you know, and I was just like, I completely get it. I know it's almost impossible, but it's not impossible. And like, let's just approach it like it's going to be amazing. And I have to say, like, they just put themselves on the map for me in such a vulnerable way every day. You know, like, I think the very first day we shot, Diego got slid into a morgue drawer. Like, you know, it was like, it was crappy scheduling of indie films. Like it was, there wasn't, and also look, to be perfectly frank, like I don't have a legacy of films behind me where I can say, guys, trust me, I have done 100 amazing films that you all love and know. Like this was like a new thing that I was trying to craft, and like a you know, breaking a level in my own career. So there was nothing to really point to be like,
Well,
see.
that's true. And then it's also just such an ambitious project that even even any A-list director, I feel like would have to be like, all right, here's like, I don't trust me on this one. You know, was there anything specific that you like? What was your approach for gaining the trust of them and of your team? Like, how did you think about that?
I mean, I think, thank God, everyone really loved the script. And so that carried a long way. And then it was just like holding the discomfort every day.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, like, I don't know what else you can do except like keep plowing through these difficult things. Everybody's there. Nobody's walking away. Nobody's going to like quit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of side conversations with everybody. I had like, you know, the biggest moments of like vulnerability and doubt were probably from the actors. The crew was so excited. Like they were like having like the best time, like building all these crazy rigs and doing, you know, I think they were all in it, and people really personally connected to the material in a way that was really beautiful. So like on set, even the way that the crew was kind of reacting to the beauty of what was happening really bolstered me enough to be like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like I can continue to bolster the actors in a way that's honest and that I believe in it. But you know, I think probably some of the hardest things was because it was personal, there was like an added layer of like, also like defending your life while you're trying to defend the material or defend the work. And it was like so much in my head, the visual style of it, that, and the way that it would work, that sometimes I wasn't even sure what wouldn't come across clearly. Like there was so much weird stuff and so much new stuff. It was like, which weird thing are we concerned about? Like, or what thing do I have to translate for you? And I think my producers were really amazing in being like secondary voices for me in that, and sort of getting in my, like, we called it like the wander darkly head. Like you had to get brainwashed into like the headspace of the movie. You really had to let go. When people sit and really try to like watch it and like make sense of it in the moment, I think it's really not fun. Like if you can let go, and that's sort of the message of the movie, you know, as well as this sort of like letting go. But I think when people let go and like allow themselves to go on the journey, trusting it'll get you to a good place, you know. It was constant.
That's such a cool way to think about it. And I can imagine that being you having such a clear idea, but then having to sort of to defend it to people. I can picture that. Do you, given that it was so emotional and so abstract in so many ways, the project, the essence of the project, were there any sort of hard and fast rules that you had with the DP or with, you know, like, did you have any like never or we always?
Yes. The specific marching orders were, I was there that day. I know it seems crazy, but it was magic. It felt just like this. It was beautiful, and it was just like this. So I never wanted like a big lighting shift.
Like that's something you would say.
Yes. Yeah. We were like, I was there that day. That was the marching orders. Like it always had to feel as grounded as possible. Like even if you were like, I'm here in one time and then I come over here and I'm in a different time, I didn't ever want to see like a huge, big surrealistic lighting shift where you could feel like the hand. Like we have some time lapses, right? But we don't have anything that's like a red light shines on her face and then she turns like, so there was a pretty specific, like she could turn in frame and then we could cut to her POV and then come into a new space. But I never wanted it to feel like, I mean, that was a really fine line that we were constantly like negotiating. Like, what does that mean exactly? And how can it?
That's cool. Sounds so challenging.
Really real challenging.
Just really specifically because it was so ambitious, you had so many days, how many takes are we talking about per, like, is this what do you get to do?
You know, it depends. It's interesting. Some of the performance stuff, like when we were in the bedroom and doing some of like the really, really intense shots, like between the two of them and those conversations, I would say maybe we got to 6 or 7 or maybe 8 once in a rare while. And then we would do series sometimes just to build up the emotion so they wouldn't have to break. But for the most part, it wasn't a ton, you know, it would, or because we were so scrappy. I remember when we were shooting out on the street at night, the lights kept getting in the shot and I was going to murder, you know, it was like, you're like freaking out because the actors are doing this big performing and there's like a huge light in your shot. And you're like, why didn't we know this before we started rolling? And now we have to reset. There was a lot of that kind of stuff, just like the regular stuff. but we just did not have time to be going again and again and again. So like maybe 3 or 4 would be like a sweeter spot in there, which I think is a shame. Like I'm really looking forward to what happens on a set when you can like have a few swings at something or like play or, you know, like explore on set. Like I don't even know what that's like. I've never got to do that, you know?
Yeah. Can you
I
imagine?
didn't try to like maintain that space. Like I would constantly be like, I'll never move on because we're not done. Like I'll never, you know, if we're not done, like, so let's play. Like, let's just play. Like, don't
Yeah.
worry about it. And like, do a crappy one. I don't care. Like, let's do the worst one we've ever done. Who cares? Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that. I do wonder, actually, maybe it's a good time to talk about our shared past, because I do feel like that I have that exact same sort of instinct of like, oh, like you have to get it. And like, so whenever someone says we only had time for one take, I'm like, well, what does that mean? But so then you just moved on when you were 2 takes, right? But if you didn't get it, so you just moved on. And, you know, for those watching, the way that I know Tara very specifically, I don't even know if you remember this or not, is that I had been making a bunch of very weird B movies, and then I got reached out to by like a company that had slightly more cred and slightly higher budgets than my really like VFX filled dragon movies by Sharon Bordas at Mar Vista. And she reached out, and I was like, sort of had made a bunch of these movies and was sort of like, I don't know if I can, like, it's so hard. And they're like, despite best efforts, they still kind of suck. And like, I don't know if I can do this. And so I was sort of exhausted of low budget world when she reached out to me, and she said, well, will you just do one thing before you decide? Will you just call Tara? Tara is the director that we've worked with, and she like figures out how to make a good version of this movie. And she's like smart, and I think you're gonna like her. And can you just call her and like get her to tell you that this can be cool and that I'm normal? And so that was literally the context that I called you and was being like, hey, so they want me to make this movie, and there's one I might do about like a polygamous compound, and like, and tell me about your experience.
I dragged you in. I was like, yeah, do it. It's great.
Yeah. But so, you know, so do you want to talk just a little bit about that experience? And then I'm curious about how because I went back and watched one of your films and sort of
it's interesting. There's probably some parallels. So yeah, I did 3 movies with Mar Vista, like back to back, like over the course of 3 years. And what was great for me was, you know, nobody was hiring women to do anything, or at least whatever. They weren't hiring me at the time. I had made a micro budget feature that they had almost distributed. And then I knew Sharon from the picket line of the writer's strike. And so we stayed friends, and she was like, I think I could get a woman hired here. So I think I was the first woman that Mar Vista had ever hired to direct.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
In the 70s. Yeah. Since they opened in the 70s. And by the way, they make all these Lifetime movies. So I don't know if anybody knows this, but like historically Lifetime movies were all directed by men. So I got to do like, you know, a movie about a missing girl on spring break. And then the next one, they were like, do you want to do a Christmas movie or an anorexia movie? And I was like, Christmas movie. And they were like, no, do the anorexia movie. I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. And then they told me about this thing, which is called The Inspiration, which is these cults of young girls online who are inspiring each other to be anorexic. And I went down a real rabbit hole. I think I was pregnant at the time, and I did like all this research, and I came into the kitchen and I go to my husband, I bet I could lose 20 pounds in 20 days. And he was like, what? And I was like, I'm going to eat a sandwich. And then it just was like this, such a weird, dark, cultish world. They had wanted to do the movie One Way, which was like a mom saving this starvation pact of kids. And I wrote that version, and it sucked. And I called them and I said, I'll turn this draft in, but you should know it sucks. And I have a better version that I want to do. And I told them I wanted to do like a possession movie about anorexia and like a horror, like, you know, this is not your mom's anorexia movie. And they were like, okay. And so they let me do this crazy, dark cult movie about anorexia and a girl who gets possessed by Anna, which is what all these girls online call anorexia. They pray to her, they worship her. It's horrifying. So that I can see that has some parallels, right? Like I really tried to get in this young girl's head and manifest on screen the emotional reality of like what it felt like and how dark it really was. And then on top of that, we were like, we had this whole thing about being on the internet and having these chats, right? Because she's in all these chats. And I kept thinking about like, what does it feel like when you're on your computer? Because it doesn't feel like you're staring at a screen. At some point, it's like really immersive. You lose the whole world around you. So I had seen the Infinity Room installation. This was years ago now.
That makes
years ago. And I was like, I think that's what it feels like. It feels like this sort of infinite space that's like kind of beautiful, like really immersive and like sensory. And so we created on this nothing budget. Jessica Mankey was the production designer and was such a champ, but she created a mirror room.
as well.
And of course we have like, by the way, right, who you work with, and we have no money. And the cinematographer, Damien Horan, is like, how am I not going to see myself? So we're shooting like, it was like, we did not have the means to actually do what we wanted to do. And we did it anyway, you know, like, so I think that was a pretty good training ground to, I guess, like be really bold. And like, there wasn't a lot of stakes really, it felt like, in that space because everything was so low budget. And, but I really like invested in those movies. And I think the way to actually survive making those movies is probably to not invest and just shoot them like they're an episode of TV and move on.
Yeah.
Do that. Like I went bankrupt, like, you know, posting the movie and doing all the VFX and actually my visual effects house, Ingenuity Engine, who is amazing, that team, they also did Thinspo.
There you go. Yeah. I feel like there's a couple things. First of all, there was like really clear having just watched Wander Directly, and then I watched Thinspiration, which I had seen already, and was still actually, by the way, like some twists still got me again. So again, just like a really dumb audience member, or you're very good at what you're doing, maybe both. But
that was her twist, though. That was like a network note twist, so I have to give her credit. Yeah,
still effective. But so there were a couple things. There were like the visual things, like I like the surreal, like going into the internet felt sort of reminded me of the surreal world that we were in Wander Darkly. And then even like specific, like now there, to me, your camera moves, there was like having the camera upside down, or like turning a shot upside down. And there were things I was like, I know this shot. Like I've seen this shot. I see like her eye working. And I feel like what that told me though, was sort of that you were thinking about that movie in the same way that I was thinking about my weird low budget movies, of like really like doing the dogged, like, let's just decide that it's going to be like an Oscar winner, even though it can never be. Like, let's just like really, like how much can I learn from this and how seriously can I take this? And like, and that there's of course things where you're like, well, right, that's not what I would have wanted if it was my dream project and there's no money, but like, what can I do? What can I accomplish here?
Which by the way, was the difference between doing in a space where nobody really wants you to do that and doing it in a space where everybody is pressing for you to be your very, very best, and like that, like never really good enough until you're happy. Like it's so different, right? Mm-hmm. So that was the difference for me. Like I remember I had a producer say on one of those movies, look, let's just like dial this one in and then we'll go get like a real movie. Mm-hmm. And I was like, bro, like, I don't get another one, like, it's like all I have. Like, I only have the one I'm doing right now. Like I have to, and even when I'm on an episode of whatever, I really try to give it my all. Like, I just want to like, that's the fun of the work, right? Like, to half-ass it is just like the saddest, like,
yeah.
And sometimes you feel like when you're trying your hardest. So like, you might as well try. I don't know.
Have you ever had the experience on episodic of being like too much because you're used to your indie film world? Because this is the experience I've had.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is going to be the best ever because I'm going to work so hard. So good. And they're like, okay. But like, not always, but sometimes like enough. Like
also, especially my first few episodes were like deep season, like season 8 episode, whatever. And I would be like, I really want to try this thing. I don't know if you guys have ever done it. And then they'll be like, did it. We did it. I'm like, okay. But I also love those teams, and I respect that I'm not really like breaking the mold. Like I get it.
It's just it's like very funny that the people who had to like the blood, sweat, and tears that go into those indie movies, that like it's lives or die by you pushing your very hardest every single day and annoying the hell out of everyone because you're just like trying to make it the best ever, and then going into episodic world where not always again, but sometimes people are just like, whoa, like
whoa.
They're very excited about this show. So are there sort of any specific, because those, just for reference for everyone, those like that, I think those shoots tend to be around 15 days. And so it sort of requires you to think of ways to shoot things quickly. And I'm just wondering if there's certain like specific tips or tricks or ways, oh, if I get in a corner, this is what I'll do, or, how do you think about that?
It's so funny because it feels like several lifetimes ago that I was doing those movies, but I think I remember on Thinspo, maybe Lost Boy, which is the last one I did, sort of saying to the producers and Sharon, and thank God they were like, okay. But I said, I can't make it good and cover it like in every angle. So we have to pick, like either I can execute the scene the way that I think it should be put together, but it'll only be put together one way, or I can like cover it from every angle. But I can't do both. I just don't have time for that. Like we don't have time for backups. And that was sort of the way that I ran, was like, if you give me 14 days, there's no room for a safety net. I just have to shoot the movie I see, but there's not going to be 18 movies to cut. It's just one movie. And I felt that way about Thinspo too, actually. And I used that same language. It was like, we don't have safety net. Like we just have to trust ourselves that our choices are good choices. And that they'll work, I think specifically, like there have been times more in episodic work where you had like a big fight sequence plan and suddenly you only have an hour on the night and you like have to rethink it as a oneer. And that's sort of the same thing that happens, I think, on those little movies. It's just, you have more experienced people helping you craft it and make sure, like sometimes those things end up better than the original idea anyway. Like everybody's like, oh crap, okay, we got to get it. We'll get it, and everybody's really excited. And then you have this crazy butt dolly shot through cables and all these things of like an amazing fight that would have been such a pain to shoot the other way. You're like, oh, that's 45 minutes. But look, I think getting people excited, getting your crew and cast excited to make like a movie that's under $1 million that's going to end up on cable is hard. And that also translates into getting a crew excited, being appreciative, getting everybody on board to make something, to do your best. Like if you're showing up every day excited, do your best and make something cool, the people around you are going to start getting excited about doing their best and making something cool. So that really translates for me.
That makes a ton of sense to me. Yeah. And I guess it seemed, what I feel, I think you feel from what we're talking about too, is sort of like you can be really ambitious because you've pulled off crazy shit before, So it's like, so that like when you're telling people for Wander Darkly, like, I'm sure you had to have conversations where people like looked at the schedule and they're like, should we just cut some date, or should we just cut some locations, or like, should we simplify this? And you're like, no, I got it.
Good. Yeah. By the way, though, it's like, it's funny because in some way I always say you have to be a little bit deluded and a little crazy to think it's possible. Yeah. And you just make it happen. You know what I mean? Like it's actually maybe my best feeling when everybody thinks you're crazy. And if the producers even say yes, even though they're like, never going to work, and then it works. And you're like, see guys, it's all good.
I was never worried. What do you mean? It's fine.
I think on the one that worked for me was on, for whatever reason, when we went up to the rooftop to shoot the scene where Adrian is like threatening to jump, and everybody wanted us to do it like in a green screen or in a parking lot or something. And I was like, I don't see it. Like, I just don't see how you're going to get that feeling and that roof line and everything. Like, how are you going to get the skyline and everything? And so I talked to everybody. We could only have like 5 people on the roof. It was a super pain in the ass. It took half a day. It was such a pain, but it's gorgeous. And it feels real. And, I remember fighting. I fought for it for so long. And then we were up there, or like the dolphins, it was like, we can get dolphins, So it was like these fights that seemed insane, and that you win those battles. There's like nothing as gratifying as like winning those battles. I mean, look, sometimes you're facing the sand under a wave, sometimes you're like crushed and nothing's working, but winning those battles is a pretty great thing.
Yeah. I think it's like an under talked about part of the job, actually, is just literally being the person who keeps saying that something's not good enough until it's right, is like one of those things that I think is like half my job sometimes or more.
It can be really lonely. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Being that
Yeah.
person who like has to set the standard of like what's going to make it cut for you. Like, how is it
Yeah.
going to work in the cut? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Do you, in terms of just how execution of things, just going back to production, like I'm thinking about that rooftop, but just because so your shot lists and your shots were sometimes dictated by these really complicated specific transitions, and you talk about how you have a general sort of theme of when the camera is more chaotic or on dolly. But in terms of do you shot list extensively? Do you block with actors and let that dictate it? How do you conceive of
Yeah.
scenes?
So, I mean, I actually found this to be the most challenging, because if we had had more shoot time, it would have been really nice to have spent time with the actors blocking in the locations. And we didn't have that, right? So we had a week of rehearsal where we hung out in an office and, you know, had a lot of conversations and all that, but we didn't get anything up on its feet in that week. There was no way for me to block. So I did do all my own blocking and shot listing. But, you know, when you're working with actors who want to be a part of that process, and you're not like on an episodic schedule where they're just expecting to come in and be told what to do,
Yeah.
it gets really tricky. And so it was really just like a dance, you know, it was like a balance. Like I would come in with a plan of what I wanted to do and hope that it worked for them. And if it didn't, we would like throw it out and do something else and take that time. But part of the challenge of that then was like, okay, so in my head, because I had you crossing here at the end, that built my transition, and I was going to go past you into those ribbons. And now you're going to cross to her earlier. And there's this beautiful moment happening, which is fantastic. And I would never quit that. And this is all quietly in my head. Right. Yeah. But I'm like, but now I need a new transition.
Yeah.
So I'm like quietly whispering with the DP and with the producers and like talking it out, you know, and then we find something new, and that, you know, and like just holding on to the performances at all costs. That was like my kind of marching orders for myself, I guess, was like, but then, you know, it would be like, okay, Diego, like, I know that was a wonderful performance. Could you at the end of this take just look to the right for me? You know, like, he would be like, okay, you know,
how much of it were you, just in terms of talking to actors? Because I feel like this is one of those like really in the weeds things, but would you literally just say things like, I need you to turn to the right? Or would it be like, or would you come from a motivational place of like, and then you're wondering, your mind wanders and I don't know.
Yeah, no, I normally do. But for this, because of the transitions that we were building, I was like, so this is what our transition is going to be. This is how we get there. So you sort of look off this way, and that'll motivate the camera. And you know, in retrospect, like the more we've talked about it on Q&As and everything, Diego and Sienna and I, the more I have to like laugh at how insane it was to be like making them do these things. And it's just testament to how professional and amazing they are, that they were able to like do this level of performance and also just like look to the right with no motivation.
Yeah.
Like pull it up
deep in the moment and then like step.
They're like, I can hear them now. Don't tell other directors we can do this. Like, you know, like, I don't think they want to be asked this again. But so that was a little bit, that part was really, it was just, you know, trying to say, I would like literally come in like so softly at the end. It was perfect. We're just going to go one more time. And at the end, I need to follow. I mean, the camera's going to follow you out the door, you know, and they knew. I mean, at some point we just sort of were like, okay, what's the transition? You know, like,
I mean, this is what they signed up for. Like, it's probably, you know, when they read the script and that, you know, I'm sure they were like, even if annoyed in the moment, like excited to make the film everything that the promise of the film, you know, like bring the promise of the film to life.
And they work really differently, you know, like Diego, I mean, they both have done a lot of theater, but, and their characters were so different. So like, while Sienna had to be really unmoored, Diego sort of became this, like what he is in the film for her, which is like an anchor for her and like a real, like, you know, a touch point for her. So in some ways, like with Diego, he really wanted to know all the technicalities and Sienna really didn't. And so then even our rehearsal process before we would roll was really interesting, because Diego would be ready to like properly rehearse, but Sienna's work was so, man, I mean, you just couldn't duplicate it in rehearsals. You couldn't be like laying that out in a rehearsal and then also do it 4 takes, you know? So there was like this constant, like, you know, look, a dance, like I think you do in any show, but it was a really interesting specific process with all that going on, with all the technicalities on top of that.
Was it like, how was the mood on set based on how heavy all of this is? Like how, I don't know, was it like tough? Like not, like just, was it like, I don't know. It seemed like when, because days when you have emotional actors, oftentimes you're like, okay guys, like, let's not like, no around, like we kind of need to be here for this. And this was there's so much of that in this movie. I'm just curious if you sort of felt like you needed to hold that space on set in that way, or.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, first I'll say I had this really lovely crew. I had asked everybody in the very beginning, like at our production meeting, first of all, I told everybody that it was based on an experience that I had had. So people were like sort of invested in me with me sharing this personal thing. And then I kind of asked, I said, like, it's going to be really hard work for the actors. And I just asked that people not have cell phones out when we were on set. It's my least favorite thing when actors are working and like somebody's sitting in the corner, like doing this, like, I just think it's bad energy.
What? You asked people, did they do it?
Yeah.
Did they not? Wow.
Yeah. But it's not like we were, I'm trying to think like, we were in like an 11 by 11 bedroom. So like, yeah, like put your phone away, like for, like don't have your phone out when the actors are around. Like that was basically what it was. I think that it was definitely an intense shoot. There's like footage on set of like Carolina, like rubbing my back at monitor and me being like,
yeah.
And there's like a shot of me and Sienna on the rooftop. My face just looks like it's falling off my head. I think I wore most of the pressure on the shoot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't necessarily think a shoot has to be fun to be valuable. It's like,
it was not that shoot. Like I would joke with Carolina in the mornings. I'd be like, yeah, did you sit in your shower last night? Yep. I know. And then I'd be like, we could do other jobs. We don't have to do this. We could be bakers. We could like every day. She'd be like, stop saying that. So this was a really, really hard one. And I took a week-long vacation with my family when we were done, and I was having fever dreams about it every night. It was a pretty intense one for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like we all got into this weird headspace. It was very confusing.
I would think so. I would have been shocked if you were like, it was just nonstop laughter. We cut and then everyone just cracked up every time.
From now on out, it's all talking dog movies. It's all
yeah.
It's all like hilarity ensues,
Just because so we don't end on how intense but we're running out of time. Is there a moment or two that were just like particularly satisfying? Either it was exactly what you had pictured, or it was different than like that you just felt like, I'm making this movie and this is why we're doing it, kind of thing.
I think there's probably two, one in production and then one in the post process. Actually maybe both were in the post process. Like there's this scene where Adrian is in the bedroom, like digging through the clothes and everything, and like realizes what's happened. And I had him right here, and that scene, and Sienna's performance was so beautiful. And we did have like a really subdued day on set that day. It was like everybody was really there for her and like in full support. And I think, and I knew it in the moment that I was like, this is really special, and this work is really special. And I was really grateful to her. Like watching her work was like some of the best moments. Like she just brought so much right in the moment. But in post, we were watching like one of the takes, and at the end of a take, you can hear me like quietly call cut, and then the camera keeps rolling for a minute, and Sienna breaks character, but she can't stop crying. She's like trying to catch her breath, and she sits on the bed and she just crosses her legs and like can't kind of catch her breath. And it just made me really grateful to the level of, work she was putting in, and the depth of what she was going through again and again every day on that set. And to just see her like on the bed, it was something about the way she crossed her legs and sat there so vulnerable. And it really just made me grateful to be working with great artists, to be telling something that I thought mattered, to be touching a feeling that like had been so fundamental to a change in my life. Like it was just really like, that was that moment. The other thing is the day that we shot the dolphins and the end of the movie, half of the crew got sick. Some of the shots that you see that you think are like the driver are like not, because he was puking. I mean, it was like such an incredible crazy.
Wait, what, like got a flu or like?
No, motion sickness. Everybody got seasick. Except for me. Like, thank God my father was like a sailor when I was a kid. Like, I'm very boat comfortable. So everybody's puking, and it was such a crazy day. And I didn't have my monitor stop working. So we're shooting, but I have no idea what we're shooting.
No.
Literally no idea what we're shooting. And we get to the dock, and I'm like, everyone's like saying goodbye. It's like one of our last days. Everybody's hugging, and I literally am like sitting in a corner, like, I don't know if I have the end of my movie. I don't know if I have it. I have no idea. Yeah. And so I sat in a trailer with Lynette and Sam, who are the two producers from 51 Entertainment. And they're like, blah, 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 Sundance and blah, blah, blah. We'll do this and we'll do that. And they're so excited that the movie's like done, that we're done. Yeah. And I just sat there like rock. Like, I had no idea if we got the movie. And then we went into the trailer. We waited for the DIT to get the footage up. And I remember watching the footage of like those big wide shots that we got, and the last shot of her with the baby. And we were all like, oh, there's the end of the movie. And that was like this huge relief. And then it was actually one of the first things we cut, I think, and finding that song, on an Oak track. And then you're like, oh, okay. Like, this is like, here's the magic, right? We have some magic. So we just have to get everything else up to that level.
Yeah. That's that you needed to be brought down really low to be able to enjoy the high of that success.
I always say, like, if I could do one thing, I wish I could just take out like the anxiety that comes along with this work, right? Like, and speaking to all directors here, like, if you could just remove the anxiety of like, oh God, it's like, it's never going to work, But I remember, like, I think a lot of directors are like searching for the disaster, in advance of the day. Like, who was it looking for the demons under the bed when I saw him talking about Roma? But it's that feeling of like, okay, how do I get ahead of whatever crisis is about to attack?
Yeah. You carry it so that no one else has to. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. You show up prepared, right?
Thank you so much. This is just what I wanted. I just wanted to get to hear everything about the movie for an hour, and now we did. So
I really appreciate it. It was really fun. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned in the coming weeks as we bring you discussions of films from Gerard Bush and Christopher Renz, Nate Parker, and Aaron Schneider. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.